The night belongs to us. We will bathe in their blood and relish their screams.
Hi everybody, I'm Mark White. I'm the former project lead and managing director for Southampton Vampire by Night. In this video I'm going to try and talk about history, not the history of this project, but the importance I feel for having historical events tied into your game. Now, the reason behind this is well, there's multiple reasons for this. One, I'm a massive history nerd. I like my local history. I definitely like medieval history and stuff like that. But basically, I really enjoy learning about the past. And because of that, that kind of inspired me to put the past into the game. Now, for your projects may not involve vampire. Your LARP may not involve vampire stuff, so it might be harder to do that. But the best thing about vampire for me was that vampires have been around, for forever. Well, not forever, but for a long, long time. And so you can kind of tweak moments in history to have like a vampire feel to them. And that opens up a lot of doors. So yeah, I put history into the game and I was keen about history because I like history. So there was that. The other thing is, when you're plot writing, when you're trying to create stories for your game, it's so much easier to use a kind of source material to utilize past events and put those little twists on them to make things easier for you when it comes to coming up with intricate weave together kind of stories and scenarios and stuff for your players, and making it feel grounded and real. Well, if you can link it to some real world events, the better. Just be careful with that. When I say real world events, I would strongly advise to avoid anything in recent memory. So, don't put COVID into your plot lines, anything like that, because you would be, there are people that lost family during COVID and there are people that were affected greatly during it. So you having it as some kind of vampire plot, or some plot in your LARP could upset people. So that's why recent memory for me is something we've always said it was a 3-generation gap. And if we do put anything into the game that is less than that, then it was something we were thinking about in detail to make sure that it was handled in a way which is unoffensive, etc., etc., etc. So yeah, there was that. And the third reason for putting history into your game is it allows you to utilize real world things like search engines and the internet for players to go out and find information. So it saves you having to put in documents into the game, like an old parchment, or whatever it is, trying to tell your history when you can utilize existing historical information that's quite freely available to anybody for that to be their means of research. So, for example, for those that play vampire and stuff like that, Mithras and the origins of Mithras Mithras was a real person, and there are links to his real exploits put into the lore behind Mithras, the fictional character, the vampire. So that gentle tie to that individual known as Mithras at the time really helps ground that character in your game world, and it also allows players to kind of research into that character's past with wealth of information found on the internet. Granted, you always have that thing that the Mithras that appears on the internet it may be different in subtle ways to the vampire, because the vampire's covered up the truth in some way, so what's on the internet may not be the exact same thing. So anyway, so those are the kind of the reasons behind it. It can save you a load of time in regards to creating your plots. It can save you time when it comes to actually putting that the information into your game world. You don't have to create a buttload of documents. They're all available online already. And history's cool. Well, it can help ground your game. So for those of you that are making projects that are like a fantasy LARP or something like that, there's no reason why you can't still utilize at least the inspiration from history to create your plots, your factions, etc., etc. It will definitely be something you can utilize. For example, before Profound Decisions did Empire, they created Odyssey, and Odyssey had lots of ties to basically history. It was all about you turning up and you could play Egyptians, Romans, Greeks and stuff like that, and there was big arena fights in front of the gods and all of this kind of stuff, and there was a lot of aspects of modern history, when I say modern history of the real world, were tied into that game, which saved them so much time and legwork trying to make it all up, making up, not is replacing Romans with, something called I'm trying to think of the name of the Frosties, and now the Frosties are, this whole made up, history and why they wore certain armours and all of that kind of stuff, when if you just utilise Romans, you've done it all for you. There's already imagery out there, so you don't have to go and get all the photo shoots done, etc., etc., etc. So you get what I mean. What I'm trying to imply by all this, it can definitely be a time saver for your game to link aspects of your game to real world stuff. So for us, when we were creating Savannah Vampire by Night, both me and my wife at the time were very, very keen in creating plots and stories that linked in with Southampton's history. And it was fantastic going down the rabbit hole. We did all kinds of things. Like we went to a place called God's House Tower, and we spoke to an individual there, which you can see one of the videos of that. If you scroll through my videos, you'll see one talking about God's House Tower and an individual that we spoke to at God's House Tower about some history. But what they had there, which I hadn't come across before, was like a library, and in that library was basically, it's a library of Southampton history, and there was loads and loads and loads of cool things in there, including where all of the old cellars and stuff were found or were used. We used to have this thing where we would store wine and stuff in these cellars, big cellars underground, and those kind of things those underground vaults are still scattered all around Southampton, and some of which you can gain access to. You can hire them, etc., etc. So that was interesting. Also, it was interesting seeing how the wall itself that appeared around the outskirts of Southampton was paid for, and who upkept it, and all of that. The locations of where the old castle used to be. Loads of little bits, but also then there's loads of history to do with people that have been in Southampton. There's lots of stuff to do with ghosts and stuff like that, and sightings in Southampton. That was interesting because there was actually a book covered about all of these sites, and we were going to have this whole load of wraith plot and ghost plot based around actual, so if someone was to look at our plot line and then go online and Google, they could actually see all of the rumours and the history and everything else to do with that area, and that would help them in their kind of search to solve that plot. But yeah, there was, as I say, there was loads and loads and loads of stuff. So I would strongly recommend that, if that you put some of your local area history into your games, or you try to put some form of history into it, because it's going to save you a load of time, and it's going to make your game seem that much more, thought out. But yeah, we tried all kinds of stuff. We were having plot lines tied. So all of the NPCs that we created, the core NPC, these were like the meta plot NPCs that were in Southampton. All of them had ties to historical events that have taken place within the city. So there was like something big that happened within the city was then tied to one of these NPCs. If it was Pestilence, the Nosferatu, who was trying to create these horrible diseases, etc., to take over or eradicate the world, that's when the Black Death and Plague and stuff was in Southampton. We've had linking to even the whole meta end of the meta plot to do with the sarcophagus or the coffin. That actually was referenced to. There was a time when it was thought that actually happened or was taken through Southampton. That's in World of Darkness plot, I believe, or something like that. But there was definitely a link to that within Southampton. What else was there? There was during the bombings that took place during World War II. That's when the Tremere, one of our NPCs, entered Southampton. There was a moment where Southampton got sacked, basically got taken over, and that happened when on a Sunday when everybody was in church, they basically landed and then they just walked up the street and then just killed everybody in the church and took Southampton. Now everybody in the city fled, and then there was reinforcements gained, and they took the city back the very next day. And then due to that, the walls were built, reinforced, etc., etc. But what we've done is that during that raid, during that event that took place, we had one of the vampires actually got trapped within the church in the catacombs, and there was a reason for the raid that was taking place that we just linked to vampires. And there was a vampire that got caught and kept within the vaults. And has been there ever since, kind of thing, until recent events where he broke free, and he broke free during World War II when the bombings took place. It cracked the you get what I mean. I'm just going down this whole story thing here, but it's because we link these individuals to historical events, and that was awesome. Even the Toreador we used, I've talked about it when I talked about the website. There was a Toreador that we had that had a fascination and like a sick, twisted way of art or enjoying themselves, which was that they would, using their vampire abilities, would manipulate and force husbands to turn on wives or wives to turn on husbands and do horrible things, and then make it in a way where that individual would then get caught, would lose all memories of the events that have just taken place, and then be hung. And the Toreador would turn up to watch the hangings, and it's that kind of thing where the person would feel they are 100% innocent and have no idea what's going on and all of that. So we tied that character to there was a couple of murders that took place, which people afterwards, it was reported it felt that exact way, and also there was hangings that took place that we linked to that character. That's very morbid, but we were trying to express that this was a very unhinged vampire. A lot of the vampire NPCs that we had, a lot of the meta big bad guy kind of characters, they were unhinged. And the reason why we created them that way is because we were trying to make them all independent, so their own strong goals and agendas are what they're trying to achieve, but also that they would be able to be work with both the Camarilla and the Sabbat, because that was important. You couldn't just make all of the NPCs all whatever, one kind of moral alignment sided. Because it would make it harder for the other faction to get involved. That I'm not going to go into it, but genuinely that was that. So, as I say, we were on purposely tying in historical elements to the characters, to the plots. When I talked about the plot lines that I was creating for like the downtime system plots, a lot of the locations that these things were taking place in, especially where the final ritual was taking place, was caught with historical things. There's a ginormous basically the final location where the ritual takes place there was this massive, great big hole dug in Southampton Common. And I think it's where they were looking for a new water source, or I can't remember the exact things. It's been a long time since I looked at it, but there's just massive, great big hole that's just like covered up with a cap kind of thing, and we were tying the last ritual to that. And the reason why that hole was dug, we just changed it. They weren't looking for water. It was dug because there was something they were putting down there that allowed this ritual to have such a large effect. But yeah, this is what I mean. You're just kind of looking at historical stuff and going, oh, that would be cool. What if I twisted it to like this, or if I did that with it? And then all of a sudden, you've got a really cool, interesting plot. So yeah, that's the reasons behind it. And like I say, it's definitely worth looking into, even if your game is set in a imaginary world where none of real world events can be utilized in it. You can still have a nosy through history, and you may be able to find that there's some really cool things in there that you can put into your game. You just have to change them around a bit, and it will be a bit more work than if you were just utilizing Google, etc., for players to look at. But it's definitely something worth doing. So that's my 2 cents on it. This video is a shorter one, but yeah, hopefully you get an understanding of some of the stuff we were doing, and it's one of those things where it annoyingly, when we had set the game to basically take place over three chronicles with 4-year gaps in between, so we could use past events, recent events, to help with stuff in the game. And it was one of those things where we spent a reasonable amount of time when we were doing Code of Conduct, which I'll get to in a later video. We struggled with certain things in regard to utilizing modern stuff. So my final thought on this, and I've gone a roundabout way of saying it, is that it is far easier to safely use historical, non-religious, historical events and historical, things, events in your game than it is to try to utilize recent events in your game, due to the fact of causing offense, upset, and generally just, so that's the last thing. History is one of those things that's useful for that. And I'm sorry at the end of this video I've kind of gone off. I had a thought trail, and it's it's one of those things where when we tried to add modern elements into the game, they took us so long to try to make sure that they were handled correctly, whilst when we looked at historical things, it was far easier and more simple to just twist them and utilize them and bring them in, because the likelihood of offense being caused was far smaller. So there you go. Anyway, I hope you have found this video useful. I hope you found the other videos useful so far. I think I'm about halfway through now. It's like talking about the project. So hopefully you've enjoyed. Please continue to comment on the videos and share these kind of things within your communities. And I know that can be difficult, but if you do have a LARP group, pop the video on the LARP group or direct people towards them. It makes a massive difference. Signal boosting a small channel like mine is a nightmare for me, and it can only grow and get bigger if the community helps to signal boost to get the videos to a wider audience. If you can help, please do. And if not, don't hesitate in the comments to ask questions, anything like that, anything that I haven't covered in the videos and you want more information about, please just put it in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, please remember that this series is about how not to make a LARP. So I haven't produced a successful LARP. So a lot of the kind of information I'm giving you is more to do with don't do what I did, but maybe, this could have worked, etc. But once again, please remember, this is coming from someone who failed to create a LARP. So hopefully I'll see you all again soon. I love you all. Goodbye.